Oh boy, it's been a long time since I've done a Promised Neverland video. I believe when we last left off, either the crew was about to escape from the orphanage or finally escape from the orphanage, and a lot has happened since then. To me, being honest with you, I feel as though now the author has a very grand idea of where, or I believe there's two authors, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if they're male, female, whatever, but like, I believe the people behind the Promised Neverland anyway, when they initially started, probably thought there's a huge possibility we're gonna get canceled, because I feel as though they had it damn near perfectly structured on the kids escaping the orphanage. I feel as though like that was a huge climactic point in the story, and it really was, of them escaping. But I feel as though maybe shortly into getting into, the forest and them getting out of the house or whatever, I think the authors maybe were not necessarily lost, but they didn't have everything planned out, and that's why we got quite a few chapters of like, hey, we're falling in a ditch and there's a bunch of fucking weird plants and shit like that. That was slowly building the world, so we got some world building out of it. But I feel as though the authors really now are finding their stride on where they want to go with it. And I mean, the escape, amazing. Like, the Promised Neverland is really quality shonen. For the people that are like, oh, shonen manga, like, this is a good one. Promised Neverland is a good series that I highly recommend. We're about, I want to say, 47, 48 chapters in right now. I might be behind by one chapter now that I think about it. I think a chapter came out and I haven't checked it out yet. But we're almost 50 chapters in, and I can tell you that this is quality shonen. It's not like in Naruto's, One Piece's, and Bleach in the sense of it's not action. It's about kids escaping an orphanage, and I feel as though I'm saying this for people that don't know Promised Neverland, even though a lot of people are already hip to it and shit like that. But it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, talking about the world building and shit like that, because prior to this, I was assuming like, okay, maybe they're just on some remote island and there's a bunch of fucking creeps that are just doing this to these kids. We found out a big bombshell, so spoiler alert, by the way. If you don't want to be spoiled, then hoy, tell it out of here, mate. Fucking get out now, mate. Pretty much, the world was split down the middle, essentially. Not, figuratively speaking. It was split down the middle in a sense, because for the longest time, probably 1,000 years, there were demons and humans, and in order to do a peace treaty, they're like, yo, okay, we leave you alone, you leave us alone, call it a day. And the kids, which it kind of really makes me think, like, they never stood a chance, because their ancestors essentially were parting gifts as like, hey, here's some humans so you guys can live on and shit like that. And then they kept breeding them and breeding them. So on the demon side, there's humans that are there as livestock, as like presents from the ancestors. And that's what our crew, Emma and Ray and, well, R.I.P. Norman, I guess, even though I still don't believe Norman is dead. That's what they are. They are essentially parting gifts from their ancestors, which is fucking insane. And I mean, I ain't gonna lie, when I was reading the chapter of them revealing all this shit, and they're like, oh my god, there's no hope. Yeah, there's hope. There's a whole other side of where humans are, and they're living in paradise and shit. So, honestly, that reveal was awesome. Really good world building. I really, really enjoyed that. Do I think the Promised Neverland has changed? Absolutely. The Promised Neverland is not the same manga. After they escape from the orphanage, it is essentially almost a whole different manga. Yes, a lot of it is mind games, which is what Promised Neverland was built upon. Like, how they're going to defeat Mama using strategy and intelligence and shit like that. So that's still a core element to it, but it's very different. Now they're trying to survive in the wild. Now we're running into people that are seemingly demons, but they're not necessarily bad. So we're dealing more with the demon side of things now, opposed to just dealing with the housekeepers like Mama and Sister Crone and shit like that. So the Promised Neverland manga has changed a lot from what it used to be. We're literally having to physically fight shit and run and all sorts of crazy shit. So yeah, definitely changed. Do I like it less? That's hard to say. I feel as though I'm getting a different manga now. Like, prior to this is just like, hey, how we're gonna outsmart Mama so we could get out of this orphanage, and I really, really dig that. When we got the change, initially I was like, am I gonna really like this? Like, this feels as though I'm going into like what would be essentially a sequel. It's a different experience. I don't like it less per se. It's not probably exactly what I initially bought into the Promised Neverland for, but then again, you always had to have that mindset of like, eventually they really could escape, and that probably won't be the end and shit, so things are gonna get different at some given point. So it's like, I still enjoy it almost the same. It's just, it's a different experience. It really is. The kids are going through different obstacles now. They're not just hiding in the room and going through Mama's room to see if they can find something. It's different. I love all the world building, though. I will say that the world building exploded immensely once we got out of the orphanage and the home and that little plot of land and shit like that. Like, we found out that the world is just different and there's a whole side with humans. So I'm assuming that hey, that's the end goal. Now we have an actual end goal. Like, the end goal was always just to escape and shit like that. Now we have an end goal of, like, we need to go back eventually, get Phil and them, and then go and try somehow to get to the human side, even though it's seemingly impossible. But then again, we also had that revelation of, well, hey, how is this guy bringing, you know, some shit from the other side? So many really cool things. Honestly, I've really been enjoying The Promised Neverland. It's a different manga now. It's not the same series anymore, in a sense. It's like, now we're in the wild, so many crazy things, a lot of great world building, but I still love The Promised Neverland. It's still good. If you're asking right now, hey, Fneb, what do you think about The Promised Neverland? It's still good, really good, and I think this is going to be a big one once it gets its anime and shit like that. Really curious what you guys think about a lot of all this, though. How do you feel about The Promised Neverland manga? I guess that's one of the biggest questions since they left the orphanage. It's a different series. Do you dislike it? Is it less interesting to you? Do you think that there's a possibility that at some given point we're going to enter into the typical shonen shit where the kids are going to get powers and shit like that? Because I had a really terrible theory, by the way. Like, I thought maybe the demons that were at the orphanage were just humans that was using, like, the carcasses of these demon monsters in the forest and shit like that. But no, seemingly the monsters in the forest are actually like wild demons, and they're of a more, the ones in the orphanage are like of a higher intellectual. So it's kind of like, I don't know, if you want to use evolution as an example, gorillas to humans and shit like that. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And overall thoughts of The Promised Neverland up to date. I believe there's 48 chapters out right now. How do you feel about it? Do you think that it got weaker since the escape? I would say it hasn't been as exciting because it was more of a personal struggle now. I mean, once the demons kind of try to capture them in the forest and shit, it was kind of tense or whatever, and those people that rescued them. But I think the big bombshell of the, you know, the world being split and shit like that was what we needed to really kick this further and get back into the really exciting stuff that we felt when we first got into The Promised Neverland. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and stalk my Facebook to get more when the video ends. I'm Fneb World, and as always, people, have an awesome day.